Let's just start.
We are recording.
Hey, we are recording. Hey, welcome once again after a little bit of technical difficulties, which is the way things usually work. Good morning, good evening from wherever you may be across the nation, around the world, or, from other worlds. This is the Tech Reckoning Fest. My name is John Troyer. It is August 8th, 2019. This is the third one of these that we've had, the first one this year. I hope we can do some more of these because they're actually a lot of fun. We changed the name to Tech Reckoning Fest. We invite people who are engaged in their communities, whether you're a V-expert or not, whether you work with Microsoft or AWS or Red Hat, anybody. We welcome you all. And I hope that our conversation can keep on going after VMworld. This show, this event is focused a little bit on, primarily on VMworld. But, we're going to hope to keep on doing these because I think there's a lot of interesting stuff happening in the public cloud space. And frankly, there is no such thing as just a VMware admin anymore. People's jobs are managing a portfolio of services and technologies. Anyway, hey, I'm going to put up, I've got some slides, but I don't think they really matter. Anyway, we're about 10 minutes late, so let's keep going. Oh, I am going to share this so that when we cut this thing up, we can. So we've got a good show. It'll be about 90 minutes. We're going to try to go fast. If you have ideas for other ones of these, happy to. It would be fun to do that with you. Here, let me try to share the screen while I'm talking. That's one of the problems. All right, welcome to Tech Reckoning Fest 3. I'm putting this up here, and I can use it on YouTube then. Our first person we're going to talk with is John Hildebrand from Cohesity. We're going to talk with him for a couple of minutes, and we're just going to go live to him right now. Thanks, John. I'm going to stop sharing, and then we can, how do I stop sharing? There we go. John, hey, welcome.
How's it going?
Good. Hey, John, I'm going to talk to you for a couple of minutes, and then we're going to talk about kind of what's on deck with you and with Cohesity. So a lot of folks know you. You were very active in the VMware community. You worked for a service provider. You worked on the customer side, or vice versa. But anyway, now you've been about a year with Cohesity, one of the fastest growing, one of the most well-regarded startups in the B2B space in Silicon Valley. You guys are leasing a couple of floors in downtown San Jose with an amazing view of the airport. We've been working together for a little while, but I mean, how has it been jumping? When people join startups, I often use the metaphor of a rocket ship. And so how's the space ride been going so far this year?
Well, there's still fuel in the rocket, so we're still flying. So there is that. We're not in any capacity going to be crashing into the ocean at any particular point, but things have been crazy. I mean, I've prior to going onto the vendor side of the equation, I wanted to get more involved in some capacity with the community and try to represent some things. I just did not expect that, when I got canned, I don't want to call it canned. I still call it canned, but when I was unceremoniously let go from my position at the service provider, this just ended up after searching. I feel to some degree like I've found at least my calling for the moment. So it's been a year. It simultaneously felt like 7, and it simultaneously felt like I just started 3 days ago. So there is that. The technology is constantly evolving. The folks that I talk to day in and day out, there's always new faces peppered with the you want to call it the old guard of folks that I've been talking with for quite some time. So it's been.
I mean, you do a lot of travel, so you've been getting a lot of miles. I know you've been working. So tell us a little bit. I mean, tell us where you are. You've been traveling to undisclosed locations around the country, or disclosed locations around the country, in this rolling data center. Can you tell us a little bit about the truck?
Yeah. So last year, roughly around, right around now, because it's getting technically it's our beginning of our fiscal year, and sales kickoff was last year, and we got informed that we were going to be doing this project. So then in early October, once all the orders for everything started happening, we started turning this place from basically just a 53-foot trailer into an actual rolling 3-rack data center as far as things are concerned. So, I mean, this is as much as some folks like to do smoke and mirrors with things. This is what's behind me is a very expensive rolling data center. It makes me worry sometimes when you see some of those TV shows where like jackknifed tractor trailers and things like that when you're going through certain areas. But so far, coming up on a year, this thing's been pretty rock solid, even though we're essentially stress testing it like no other.
Any particular, what's been the biggest surprise about an edge data center like that?
Honestly, based off of this, they tell us that where this particular data center and all this weight is actually happening is on the back axles, which is one of the worst locations for vibrations in here. And I don't know about most folks, but when you're designing a data center, with the exception of maybe in California with earthquakes to some degree, you're not really thinking vibrations as far as something you're going to have to worry about. So, but with spinning disks and all sorts of other different type of smaller componentry back in here, that 9 months later, I've only had one hardware failure during that entire time. And strangely enough, it ended up being one of the switching stacks where I think somebody didn't attach an ASIC properly with solder on it. That when we took it out, something was definitely rattling loose inside of it. So really, for the most part, is when you start to think about data center design, stability is definitely something you don't take for granted, especially when you're doing like an edge case like this. But I've done enough static data centers where I'm definitely not thinking about the motion of things happening, whether things go up, down, or left, right, or making sure things are secure, or things like proper stabilizer bars in between here because of all the different stresses and potentially causing some bowing with all the weight in the middle of the rack. So there was a lot of things to think about from a physical perspective that I'm actually kind of glad to sit back here and see that, for all the extra equipment that we put in for spare parts, we've only had to hit the spare part list once.
Now, on the other hand, I from talking with you, I know that bandwidth has been a fun part, and babying the machine, like letting the machines know that it's okay, that you can, like a baby, you don't have to start crying in the middle of the night if you suddenly don't have bandwidth.
Correct. Yeah. So, I mean, as much as we plan to have like a 4G internet connection, because there's plenty of satellite connectivity off the back of this thing with one of the most interesting things being, because we couldn't rely on the internet connection being constant, we do have an actual NTP satellite source that provides NTP services. So if for any particular reason the 4G communication isn't there, we're still getting, we're linking up with some satellites to get NTP communication off the back of the truck. So because we all know NTP and DNS usually cause a multitude of our outages, especially when you start thinking about the lack of connectivity that this guy has.
Cool. I don't know. I guess, actually, could you show us around a little bit since you're standing there?
Sure.
Your Price is Right sort of thing?
No, so I think, let's see, for the most part, you can see we're kind of, it's a crass term, but the eating our own dog food capability, those are our nodes sitting in the top of this thing. A couple of these things do the full protection of the device. That's their only function in here, is to be backup and recovery in the event something else should happen. We work our way down. Some of you folks might recognize some Dell EMC PowerEdge 6400 devices. And the most recent addition, if you can see the green lights at the bottom, we did swap out our primary storage array. We now have an all-flash Nimble as part of our partnership with HPE. They wanted to see their logo in here to some degree, so we're showing their logo as far as the storage is concerned. Outside of that, in case you're interested, yes, those are a 19U of batteries. The one thing to consider with this, we're powered by a diesel generator most of the time at these events. Not exactly the cleanest power, but this provides us about 35 to 40 minutes of runtime to take everything down in an emergency, or scrubbing that power coming from the diesel generator so that we're not getting any weird surges coming through at the same time. Outside of that, things are a little interesting. You can see a little bit, we're kind of in the middle of changing some of the aesthetics around here. So you're kind of catching this in a little bit of I won't say it's naked, but it's definitely needing some new clothes at this particular point. So we've ripped some of the things off the wall, and we're going to be replacing some of the aesthetics here in the truck. So And combined with that, just the amount of workstations that we have and everything else that connects to our environment, so that everything's ran on the floor. There is nothing that's coming in. Also, at the same time, everybody say hi. It's Chris. He's
Mr.
brought
Claudy. Howdy.
So both of us, we can't seem to get away from this place. Every single time, like Hotel California, we check out, but we always end up checking back in. So,
well, as an interested observer, right? You'd think, okay, well, it's a data center. I mean, sure, you got to get power and connectivity, but like, how hard could it be? Like, it's a rack, and it's in a glass case. I mean, I've seen them there before in lobbies, and I've seen them in data centers. But yet, it's interesting, the twists and turns. I think as we get more, I mean, let's level it up, right? As we get more edge computing,
mm-hmm.
like, it's going to be really interesting what happens out there.
Yeah, I mean, you said it yourself there. Things like connectivity on the edge, and then on top of it, just when you think about it, I don't know how many people power off their data centers maybe more than every once in a while. This thing literally goes up and down with an automated fashion 120 times a year. So we're having to worry about power on events and power off events more regularly than what most folks in their data centers are.
Awesome. And the truck will be at VMworld, right?
Correct. Once I get into some of our VMware specifics, after we talk about some of our latest release components, we do have a tailgate on Monday night that out at the Giant Stadium, which I think is now called Oracle Park. I just about called it AT&T, which would have been a faux pas. But we got a tailgate out there. The truck's going to be out there. Although Chris and I lobbied, we wanted to make this the actual booth, but apparently apparently the folks at the Moscone did not like the fact that we would have to push it in with diesel exhaust and didn't have any other way to push it in. So we ended up losing out on that one. So
it's always the case. Hey, why don't you walk on over to your laptop, and why don't we look at some interesting PowerPoint slides?
Yeah, I know, PowerPoint. All right, folks. Let's see. I've got sharing. Let's go.
Anyway, so the whole idea here is we're going to do we're going to alternate, some interviews, and then some video, and then some slides. And our goal, our instruction to our presenters was keep it short, 20 minutes or less, and go a little deeper on one area in greater detail rather than trying to just hit your high points in all the different areas. So, we should, raise your hand or yell on chat if you feel like we're if we're not following those rules. But the whole idea is let's go deep in one area that we can at least have a little interesting little cocktail conversation about. And then if you want to talk more, well, you know how to get a hold of John and
okay.
Chris or anybody.
So, and I know since we're kind of running a little bit behind, I may even take a little less time, even though technically I've got two topics. Now, the reason for that is we just announced. Oh shoot! It feels like 14 years ago because I'm working out all the issues with some of the new code. But we announced our 6.4 release, and with that came two real big features that we've been very excited to finally bring to the public. The first one being our runbook capability. Now, the runbook capability comes about because when you start to think about IT automation, in the past. We expect it to have this kind of Zen-like thing going on, but in actuality, it's a little more than basically, trying to manage spaghetti noodles flopped all over the place. So as much as we try to streamline things, we never get to the Zen-like portion. So based off of that, we've introduced our runbook functionality. Now, the idea, we take the entire premise of that we've got all this. I don't want to call it secondary data. I'm going to get in trouble for that. But let's just say non-SLA related data. So it's things like backups. It's things like lower tier storage utilization for things like home directories and other low tier file shares and components like that. But the runbook function actually, a few months back, we announced our application framework. And what this is basically an app that slides in there and enables the functionality for Runbook. It's an extension off of our GUI. And specifically, if you want more information on the application framework, essentially it's a glorified Kubernetes cluster with utilizing resources across those nodes. just small slivers. So we're not running intense applications, but we are running extensions and add-ons to our solution based off of it. So the idea of the runbook is that we can end up helping with overall design of being able to take some of this data. So in this first iteration of our runbook is taking things like VMware virtual machine backups. So what we can do is we can organize this on a canvas and provide some shred of actionable, kind of a workflow to some degree, but from a GUI perspective. We can basically, so once we go from the design and start to say, hey, these chunks of VMs, maybe, wait, pause, run a custom script. What we can do is also validate that all that data in question is legit. So we're doing a little bit of validation of that particular workflow at the same time. And last but not least, the executable capabilities. So once we save these runbooks, one of the most interesting things that we've extended now is you can call upon these runbooks from external sources. The API mechanism is there to add this to larger workflows for say like adding it to a VRA, VRO type of workflow, or say like maybe to a ServiceNow capability to say someone declares that, hey, we're going to do a disaster recovery testing. I need to run this particular runbook and take that data and start making sure that either it's already over at the end site and then orchestrate it and bring it up. So a few of the things that I've probably mentioned some of these already, but with some of the benefits, just, trying to streamline complex tasks. In the past, we were able to do this from, say, like a 1 VM or 2 VM perspective. Now this opens it up to grander scale as far as things are concerned. And so we can easily, quickly design workflows. You can kind of see a little bit on the UI there that it's kind of right now, again, I will state it's a V1, so bear with us. It's going to grow over the course of time, but the ability to add a custom script, pause for the overall workflow to run, and then provide an endpoint target with just the objects. So being able to just canvas those simple components and put them in the order that you want to. So, well, I'm going to skip past it because a lot of us already.
What I think is interesting there, John, is that the philosophy seems to be both provide. There's lots of ways to automate things, right? And we know we have to have more automation. Automation quickly becomes workflow because then you have to manage it and control it, and error, come back from errors and all sorts of things like that. So you've got both APIs on the Cohesity side that other things can call into a Cohesity data platform and have it do some things, as well as, of course, you have all these data services now on top, and then this workflow piece now, you can also call other things via their APIs, and kick off. So you could have vRealize kicking off one part, kicking off Cohesity, and Cohesity kicking off vRealize, and you can get increasingly, even with this functionality, which is not a full-blown no-code environment yet, but that's where a lot of these things are headed. You could start to kick off kind of, are there any particular customer examples or kind of cool things you've seen done there? I think it's a really interesting and healthy, kind of approach to the whole thing.
Well, I know, we mentioned a little bit of DR because in this particular first stage, the idea is to take on-premises VMware virtual machines and then work that so that they become working EC2 instances and you can leverage essentially AWS to be able to bring up that infrastructure and run things out there. So I know based off of that, one of the first questions I know I had when we announced this was, so where's the VMware to VMware version of this? And at the moment, the prioritization internally was to get it working with the cloud components first. And so VMware to VMware is going to be following behind here shortly with that capability, so that we can move these things from, if you think larger enterprises with multiple on-premises locations, being able to take VMs and maybe send them back to a central core and spin things up, or push them out towards push things out to the edge and spin things up where it makes more sense. DR is not the only use case. We always claim test dev. So the idea that you can take a copy of that, copy of those workloads and then be able to just kind of en masse use that one copy. Again, utilizing the non-SLA copy instead of having to target production all the time to get an image, so to speak. Utilize something else that may be a little lower on the totem pole to essentially instantiate those devices. So yeah, we have some customers who are getting into this and starting to work on things like simplistic DR workflows. And again, that from a test dev perspective, like I mentioned, we kind of did 1 to 2 you could do through some of the GUI interfaces. Now this can open this up to 20, 30, 40 multiples that you want to move around and make things happen. So essentially the scale has come out a little more in this utility, and then just putting all the pieces together in the proper workflow.
And I'm not to, this thing is fairly sophisticated and targeted at a fairly sophisticated audience. Not to say that it's never of a, what is SMB and what is a small business, and it all depends on your needs, et cetera. But this is you guys have built a fairly sophisticated platform, and I do want to highlight that, for instance, this Runbook app is delivered as an app, running in a Kubernetes cluster, running very close to the data. And that is a really interesting way of extending, having a platform and extending functionality. And I think that is, once you have this live secondary data source and all this indexing built in, it's just very interesting.
Yep. So speaking of interesting, as we move on, I'm going to blister through some of this.
Yep.
So I mentioned things like the VMware to AWS. Do expect VMware to VMware at some particular point. We do have the capability of doing a lot of VMware to something else conversion. So expect more as this expands. Just know that it is V1. We didn't try to overdo it for V1. So this is the first iteration. Expect more out of this as time goes on.
Last year we talked to Chris, actually, and he brought up humility as a cultural value of Cohesity. So I do appreciate you saying, oh, good, we're going to get to CyberScan. Well, let's go then. I was just going to say, I do appreciate you guys not trying to oversell this.
Yep. So CyberScan. So this is the interesting thing. A while back, we announced some of the capabilities of trying to do, say, data ingestion, data just change rate, anomaly discovery with our global domain manager, Helios. The idea being that we can at least kind of give a little bit of a rudimentary first flag that, wait a minute, you only change at like a 35 meg a day type of change rate. You've changed 3, 4, 5 gig or terabytes worth. You may need to check to see if something's going on here. But the realization is that type of detection was done after essentially a payload had been delivered. So the idea is what could we do to help in potentially identifying when something may hit beforehand, but maybe laying latent in your environment, or giving you more insight into what sort of vulnerabilities you have without necessarily targeting the production data. So we all know what a vulnerability is, just basically a weakness or a gap. But we see it all the time, CVE articles, we see things from all sorts of government entities letting us know that there's gaping holes in a lot of our applications that we run day in and day out. So one of the problems that we have here is when you start to think about running vulnerability scanners, I go back and I target at the bottom. It can be very taxing to a production environment. So in kind of the same theme, the idea, why don't we target the backup data? Why don't we target a lower so this other subset of data that isn't the primary workload? So basically, and then we get into some of the challenges where even if we did some of these things because of some of their taxing nature, we already have a heck of a time within IT organizations trying to schedule things like patch deployments and downtime windows and things like that. Now add things like these sorts of scanners on top of it. It's getting worse and worse for us. We have to go through so much, I won't call it red tape, it's necessary, but we have so much internal IT change control components that we have to go through to justify and get these things fixed. So what we've done is CyberScan, which I need to work on the name of that. You think being in marketing, we could come up with something just a tad bit better. Yes, I am throwing shade on my own organization. I felt that we could name this a little bit better.
So we're all family here. I
Yep.
like it. I don't mind it. I mean, cyber is overused, but it is
Yeah.
what it is.
So the idea here is, once again, it's an application. So we're delivering an application via our framework. And what it's doing is, with the idea of scanning, detecting, and restoration guidance. So you see over here I'm looking at it, would be the left-hand side. Spin up KVMs. Just as we put a Kubernetes infrastructure on the nodes, there is a small KVM environment that gets spun up on here. That's where essentially underneath the hood, we take the data, which is already in a VMDK VMX format, load it into this runtime, which has no network connectivity, and the app, which is powered by Tenable. So Tenable.io is the resource that we basically utilize to get the CVE information and some other scanning mechanisms for detecting vulnerabilities. And for those who are going to ask, we do like an every 15-minute update. So it's very similar, like some degree, local virus definitions. You keep those up to date on a regular refresh cadence. We're doing it basically every 15 minutes with the app to gain access to this database to scan for vulnerabilities. So what we do is we essentially power on that VM and that KVM environment, and we run this scanning mechanism against it. And from there, we get we work over to the right, detecting. So during the course of the scanning, we're then building out what sort of other vulnerabilities are we finding on here so that we can come up with some sort of scoring mechanism to let people know. You always got to have your red, yellow, green to let you know exactly how well, from a visual perspective, the security guy or the security folks in your organization will probably would love to have zeros showing up, but sometimes just getting in the green might be good enough and better than staying in the yellow or red constantly. On top of that, then the restoration guidance. How do we go about fixing some of those vulnerabilities? So in the reports that we get back from this, if there's a particular application that's detected, maybe it says something so say you're going to a Linux device, and just an example, because I had to update it on a very minimal Linux install, wget or curl has a big vulnerability in it somewhere, and it may say upgrade from 4.7 to 5.6. So that, being able to provide you some of the abilities of what do you need to make a change to, so that you can get a little more conciseness on the, say, your change control that you have to do. So again, I kind of walked through this a little bit, but we end up creating volumes on our device. So one thing most people haven't quite figured out, that everybody lumps us into the backup side of the equation, but there is a very powerful disk system going on, a very powerful distributed file system going on underneath that can present that data, that storage space as things like NFS mount points and S3 buckets and SMB. I'm not going to call it CIFS. I feel that if I mention CIFS, I'm going to get a lightning bolt sent down at me. But the idea is that we utilize our own internal file system, mount these things to it, and then present it to KVM, and then perform all the scanning based off of this, and then come back with all the things that we need to let us know exactly how bad, or I should say, or good things are as far as the system is concerned. Now, since this is a V1 on top of it, there are some limitations. So, we can't say that we're going to scan everything. Right now, Linux is definitely, we're targeting that right off the bat, since we know we got a lot of application servers and points of entry that are usually Linux-based to some degree. So we felt the need to get the Linux side working. Plus, I believe there was licensing issues on the Windows side that we're working through on top of it. So going through and making sure, and then we got listed at the bottom, this is brand new with 6.4 moving forward, since even if you are on a 6. Derivative with the application framework, it will not run unless you have a 6.4 implementation. So let me so the security dashboard.
I mean, one of the things that people, before we go on, I mean, one of the things that I'm doing a little research on this, I want to write something up. I mean, there's an increasing number of time delayed vulnerabilities that people are finding, like even innocuous libraries or things that your app could have been built with, that then later somebody gets control of that library and flips it, and then the next build all of a sudden either it already has the crypto miner or the ransomware built in and hidden, and it gets flipped on, or suddenly it can get flipped on, or someone takes a bad guy takes it over and flips it on. So I think that's increasingly the current point in time is not the right way to think about vulnerabilities. You have to know back into the past, back into the past where this was affected, when, and especially since, so it's not just as, when can you roll back to and what was affected. Oh, it's just it makes our, hey man, it keeps us all in jobs.
Yeah. So. Well, and then the one thing I thought there was at least a screen capture that kind of showed when we get to our recovery points inside of our solution, when we do the backup and recovery side of the equation, that vulnerability score is now part of the recovery, the recovery point. So you can take a look at it and see red, 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 yellow, yellow, green, green, and basically maybe through there identify exactly where you might have got infected based off of the scanning report, and then maybe go one step beforehand, resolve all the issues within, and bring that VM back up into your environment with all the proper security patches that should keep it from being infected from that point on. Nice. So that was something I kind of figured we would at least have a UI thing in there. That's on me for not adding that there. So, but now,
if people want to know more, like I said, they can drop by at VMworld or reach out to you. You guys have a huge presence at VMworld this year. So let's quickly go through that.
Yep. So one of the things I want to talk about VMworld, because everybody here pretty much likes their swag. Everybody likes their parties. They're trying to figure out where they're going to be on Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday. Okay. So the first things first, like any vendor who buys a pretty good space there, we always have it. We have 2 sponsored sessions, and we're actually doing something unique with the second one versus the first one. First one is your tried and true customer panel. So for those interested in wanting to hear some of the success stories on my team, Mike Letchen, who came over a few months beforehand from Nexenta, he's going to be moderating a panel involving some of the bigger customers, especially local in the area, especially with the San Francisco Giants. Even though I'm a baseball fan, I'm still bitter about the 2014 World Series because I'm from Kansas City and we should have won Game 7, but that's another story. So basically the idea is just a tilt and focus on how utilizing Cohesity simplified operations within their environment. Now, the interesting one now is session 2. So this took a little bit of selling internally, but we're devoting one of our one hour block to talking about work-life balance. It's become a very popular topic between us and the IT industry, and we felt especially with the amount of years that my team plus Rollinson, everybody knows Rollinson, it'll be fun to try to keep him from dominating the microphone at this one, but we will try our best. But the idea is many of us have stories, plenty of horror stories, about how things just really, from an IT perspective, burnout is a very big topic, and work-life balance is something that most folks think is right up there with unicorns. It's a pipe dream. So we're going to go through a little bit of, from our career perspective. We had a survey that I believe,
I got to help with. We helped with Tech Reckoning. We got a great response. Really, some interesting data that we're continuing to analyze. And I not to spoil anything, but I think that the survey shows that a lot of people are worried and stressed out.
Yeah. So we'll be going over a little bit of that data along with personal stories. It's going to be kind of not, especially for not like a community theater or one of the, like the V Brown Bag or the Code Theater type of sessions. We're throwing a little wrench into the whole idea of what a vendor-sponsored session can bring to the table as far as VMworld's concerned. One thing of note, if you are one of the 50 people that swing by the booth after this session, we actually partnered, if you've ever heard of the app Calm, on multiple platforms. We do have some subscriptions to give away. We have partnered with them, and We do have a few things to give away for just if you're into that whole idea that the breathing exercises, stopping and taking a moment can definitely help versus letting it build and build and build and then explode and probably you losing your job and walking out with both middle fingers in the air. That's not how we want our IT jobs to end up, but any little thing helps from multiple directions. So as mentioned, the Brown Bag Theaters. So if you want to learn more about this particular data center, Chris and I will be waxing philosophical about the architecture. Not only that, probably some interesting stories about what it took to get this thing up in 7 to 8 weeks, including a wonderful story about how a network architect basically tried to tank the entire thing 48 hours before the thing was supposed to ship to its first event. Followed up with a couple of other folks on our team. Teresa Miller is doing just a quick little guide to BCBR. And then Mike is also doing another one about fragmented data, which is a topic that we've probably talked and over-talked to a few folks about just in our data centers. So let's get to the actual parties. I mentioned the tailgate at Oracle Park. Come out, see this truck. I'm standing in it. You can stand in it too. We can go have fun, maybe even tailgate, have a hot dog, have a drink, something like that, and hear about things. There is a registration link. I'm sure that if you guys probably in the post follow up with this, we can make sure that gets sent out to everybody. Yeah, so we have a pretty good space out in the parking lot for tailgate purposes. Come out and join us on that Monday night. And then the big thing on Tuesday, instead of doing the tried and true musical act, we're doing something, once again, a little different. We've decided we did everyone's called it a partial, but I'd say it's more like a 75 to 85% buyout of one of the Hamilton shows within San Francisco itself. And we have, so that's what we're going to do. We're going to enjoy a multiple Tony winning traveling Broadway on the road show involving things happening at 7 p.m. working to wait to 9:30. I will mention this. I put this out there. We have that link. Sign up for a chance. If you haven't had a chance to sign up in any other capacity, we have some tickets to give away, and we'll see about getting some folks. If you're interested in going, follow the link, and we can get you hopefully with the rest of us watching this particular show. And with that, I am done.
Awesome. Couple more things. Yeah, I think go ahead and stop sharing, and we will. I just wanted to say, yeah, those tickets actually are kind of hard to get, and so I know that John and team fought for them, so he has some. So those are actually pretty hot tickets. I have not seen Hamilton yet, but the other thing I love the Calm app. I used it last night. They also have sleep stories, and so that helps us go to sleep because the stories are very soothing. Mm-hmm. And then finally, I wanted to throw it over to Amy. You guys are giving away a few gifts, and just for folks who are showing up, we had a couple that we were going to give away today. So Amy, I think you picked out some names.
Yep, we have three portable charging devices that would need to be picked up at the booth, or if you're not going to be at VMworld, let me know and we'll get it to you. The winners are Becky Elliott, Lindy Collier, and Al Rashid. Awesome. If you guys would email me, please, and we'll make sure that we get you all set up.
And these are not just batteries. These are actually kind of really cool portfolios that have chargers built into them. So they're actually kind of quite slick.
Yeah, they're very slick.
Awesome. Well, John, thank you very much. Really appreciate you sharing with us. Yeah. We'll see you at the show.
Yep. See everybody at VMworld.
All right. Next, so let's moving on. We've got one other big presentation, but a couple of other folks from the community. So I wanted to welcome Yadin Porter de Leon very quickly to the show here, and we're going to talk a little bit about Level Up and the V-Trail map. Yadin, calling Yadin.
Hey, John, how's it going?
It is going great. How are
Thanks
you?
for having me. I'm doing wonderful. I'm doing really, really good, actually.
You know, I know that you're not a guy with a lot of I know coming from you that means something. So you say what you mean.
Awesome.
So I'm glad.
I know. I'm only
go busy.
freaking out a little bit because VMworld is just right around the corner.
Yes.
I realized it was as soon as it's August, everyone starts to lose, their mind. But things are under control. Things are under control. They're happening.
So anyway, so we're going to try. This one's going to be a quick segment. So
Yeah.
For folks that don't know, you want to maybe lead off with V-Trail Map. The folks here don't need V-Trail Map, but the whole idea is that anyway, introduce V-Trail Map and then talk about some of the other stuff that's going on with Level Up.
Yeah, sounds good too. And if you want me to share, I've got some slideware, but if not, I can just talk if that's better. If you just wanted some
no slides, just talk.
Okay, perfect. All right, so just to give anyone who doesn't already know what Level Up is, I know some of the people just looking at the chat are already members of the Level Up project, and the whole purpose of us at Level Up is to bring everyone into the virtualization, or not the virtualization, but the community, the tech community. See, here's a Level Up. Bring them into the tech community and help them level up their careers with community. There's all sorts of wonderful, fantastic resources. And so many of the people already know on this. So I'll kind of get into what the V-Trail Map is, because the Level Up project is pretty straightforward and a collection. A lot of people, like I can see members already know. But for those who don't, it gives you context. Then we have something that we create every year, and that's called the V-Trail Map. And I should have had this ready. Well, Jenna, here we go. Here's last year's V-Trail Map. And what it is, it's an actual physical printed guide. And the reason it's physical and printed, you're like, printed, why would you print something? That's crazy. The reason we do is because it gets launched at a physical event. VMworld this year in San Francisco, and the first year we're doing it in Barcelona. So we're doing it in both of those places. Can I tell you who the sponsor is? Can I pimp the sponsor out?
Sure. Yeah.
Well, John was just on. So the sponsor of this year's V-Trail Map, thank you, John and team, is Cohesity. So thank you very much, Cohesity, for sponsoring this year. Super awesome. Working with Teresa Miller on it. And it's going to be launched at VMworld so that you can physically, like John had alluded to before, it's not for the super influencers. It's not for the super connected. It's not for people who've already been in this community. It's for those who haven't. And it's now, if you're in the community and you want to bring someone in, you can now take a V-Trail Map, and I'll tell you where to get them. And you can hand it to somebody at the lunch area, hand it to somebody in the Solutions Exchange, find someone in the hallway who just, like I always like to say that someone's in the Solutions Exchange, they got their VMworld backpack on, and they're looking around, they're trying to figure out what's going on. You can hand them something and say, hey, look, I know it's overwhelming. You don't know where to get started. You don't know how to connect to community, what to use Twitter for, what's VMUG, what's VMTN, what blogs do I start with, what videos do I watch? Let's just get you started. Let's get you in, and let's hand this out to you. And so we did about 600 last year. We're looking to do about 1,000 plus this year. And that's net new people into that VMware community. A crazy stat is, and this keeps coming up, about 50% or more of all the attendees at VMworld each year are net new, never been to VMworld. And a lot of them aren't connected in all these different ways of community. So the V-Trail Map is a resource that we're starting to use. VMUG leaders and others in the community are starting to use as a tool to bring people into the community and show it's not just resources, but there's people here who can help level up your career with all of that support.
Yeah, I really want to support. I mean, that was the best part about working with the VMware community and what we did with the vExperts was that we were helping folks. It just happened, right, as a result of being involved. And we all, folks that are here know it. And I think you guys would, you don't realize until you're at VMworld and you realize that 80% of the people you don't know and aren't at the VMUG meeting and aren't engaged in the community, you don't realize what a tiny sliver of activated folks there are. So it's great. It's great, Yadin. Thank you so much for pulling this together.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Super fun. So just to give everyone a sense of, if you're at VMworld, personally, if you're going there, you can find it in the VMTN lounge. And in San Francisco, it's not going to be one big village, which is kind of, going to be a little scattered. It's going to be different places. And actually Level Up is creating a nice little guide of like, where the heck is everything? The Where the Heck is Everything guide. So you can kind of find out where all the different stuff is. So keep a lookout on Twitter for that. But VMTN lounge, the VMUG lounge, it'll be at the V Brown Bag stage. And of course, visit the Cohesity booth as well in the Solutions Exchange to get a copy of the V-Trail Map. And grab 2, grab 3, grab 5. Go to the lunchroom where there's all those big round tables and just, chat people up. Everyone's like talks about networking, find someone new, chat them up, find people in the hallway and just, give them to those individuals. Say, here, this is how you can level up your career, really focus on leveling up a career, and using that community, using those community resources. And there's everyone all over the map from, John, you've been in, in the V-Trail map before, Kat is going to be in this year's V-Trail map, and anyone from Duncan Epping to William Lamb to, to Lindy. Lindy's, who I think is on the call right now. She's going to be in the V-Trail map representing V-Ladies, go V-Ladies, hashtag. And all sorts of phenomenal resources who are in there. So please, help those who haven't been benefit from, being as connected as we are. Use a V-Trail map, get it in their hands, help level up.
Yeah. In the consulting work we've done, right, I've worked with companies in other areas of tech where this kind of community of practice has not developed or has not developed in the same way. And of course, every company is not like VMware or Microsoft where these kind of foundational technologies, but it doesn't develop everywhere, that people are helping each other, that people are coming together to actually, not only help each other, but by working with each other, we help raise the whole quality of work that's done, both in our own jobs and in the field, right? New things get figured out and innovation happens. And I just want to, be grateful for what we have because, like I said, I've worked with a lot of companies where folks say, oh no, if you're an end customer, you would never do stuff like this or organize user groups or be part of a blog about your make tutorials or study guides. Or if you're a partner, why would anybody want, we try to make customers not talk to partners because partners will try to sell stuff to customers. And it's like, oh my goodness, right? We're all working on the same thing. Anyway, so be grateful. And I'm grateful. And so Yadin, you'll also be busy there at the show.
I will be pretty busy. Yes, I will be. I've got a session on the V Brown Bag stage, but most of the time I'm going to be doing VMware-y kind of stuff, shooting videos, doing podcasts, the usual kind of content creation. So I'm really relying on all the phenomenal members of the community to really engage and get the hands. And they've been just incredibly helpful. I couldn't believe it. Like last year, within like 24 hours, all the copies were gone. They were just gone. You couldn't find them anywhere because there was, so many wonderful people in the community who got in there, found them at the spots, handed them out, made sure they got in the hands of people. And I got emails from Tokyo, Japan, to Costa Rica, to Northern Norway of people who said, I brought this into my company. I brought this to my VMUG meeting. I brought this to my colleague, or it helped me learn, that, hey, look there's this awesome blog about, how to do, NSX. And I knew nothing about NSX. But there was this wonderful, guy who was, there, and I hit him up on Twitter and he helped me out. And just all these fantastic stories that I hear from individuals who just got started. Because I created it selfishly. I created it because I didn't know where to get started. And I remember I came to you, John, and I'm like, hey, John, I have this idea. I'm going to do this thing. And you're like, isn't it like 8 weeks until VMworld? I'm like, yeah, but I'm going to do it.
I told you it could not be done.
Yeah. It's only good. You said it was an awesome idea, but I don't think you can do it. And I bootstrapped it. And so thank you for sort of guidance, for inspiration. And it was so that I could figure out who all these people were and what all these resources were. And people were in the same situation as I was. And it seems to be helpful. And I'm going to keep doing it until it's not helpful anymore.
Awesome.
Until everyone's in the community.
Yeah. Hey man, thanks a lot. I'm looking forward to seeing you in a few weeks.
Yeah. See you then.
All right. Let's move on. I think our next, we'll bring up our next panelist. Next, we're really pleased to have with us the folks from Morpheus Data. We've got Brad and Chris. Hi guys.
Hey.
And, we'll start with Brad. And, I invited them here because one, it's super interesting. I've known Brad for a little while, and we'll talk to Brad here in a sec. And also that, they were an award winner last year for the Best of VMworld Awards, and also they just got in a leader in the Gartner Quadrant. So I find the whole, this cloud management platform space kind of interesting and kind of befuddling. So, Brad, thanks for joining us, and hopefully you can shed some light on it.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. It's a fun space. As some of the community I knew before knows, I was a big vendor for about 12 years. I was an engineer before that, and I've been at startup land for about 2 years. It's been a really fun ride. And on the multi-cloud topic, it was interesting. We were at the Indy VMUG just a few weeks back, and Chris was actually there kind of representing us. And a lot of people came through and saw our little pop-up banner and said, oh, I'm not into cloud, I have VMware. We said, well, maybe multi-cloud is just confusing people. We would like to turn your VMware into an elastic on-demand resource, which is exactly what the cloud is. So I think multi-cloud is ripe with misinformation. So
super interesting. Well, let's take a minute and introduce yourself. I put your name up, but so Brad, you on one of your taglines that's on one of your social media accounts is engineer turned storyteller. But I don't know, give us a little bit of background and
yeah, sure. So I have a background in computer science, information systems, databases, but I decided after about 9 years I could be a mediocre engineer or a pretty smart marketing guy. So I kind of went into the product management realm, spent a lot of time in storage, where I met a lot of community folks. For anyone out there who knows Calvin Zito, he and I go way back at HPE. It's where I spent about 10 years doing product management, go-to-market, marketing. Ultimately ended up running global marketing for them, and then decided to go to an early stage startup, a little bit Wild West in the DevOps and hybrid cloud space.
Well, it's kind of cool. I think the people in the room here and the people who are active in the community, and you don't have to be like a blogger or like some sort of influencer to realize that communication and telling stories is a part of your job, even if you type code on a keyboard, because you have to explain, you have to understand why people want to do things, and you have to explain like what's going to go wrong or what you could do for the company. And so I think storytelling is such an important part of what we do as human beings that I love. And so I love being a technically oriented person in marketing, although I don't always love marketing.
I think for what you do, right? Community and empathy, right, go hand in hand. And I think for how anonymized sometimes, Twitter and IT and, the internet can be cast, the community work you do and a lot of the people, probably watching this and in the room do, really brings that ever expanding universe closer together. And a lot of the reasons I left big company and went to startup was to kind of get closer to customers, closer to the real problems. And so I think we're all on this journey together. So thanks for having me.
Well, so, and you're there in Colorado, not in Silicon Valley. And I don't know what's as the housing prices keep going up, I keep wanting to leave too, but I don't know. Tell me about what do you, I mean, is it the skiing? Is it the fresh air? Is it the what attracted you to Colorado, and what do you like living there?
I knew what you were going to ask. Colorado, I was born and raised here. CTO of the company and I, we're in middle school together. We have the same birthday. His stepbrother's part of the business. It's almost a family business, even though we've doubled, tripled in size over the last year and are off to the races. So Colorado's great. It's got a booming tech community between Boulder. There's a lot of big companies and startups here. I think it does have that balance of good engineering schools, and it's still not out of sight, although prices have gone crazy for houses here too, and traffic's pretty bad. So all the Californians moving here.
I mean, so you were, we called it big company, and then you gave up the name, and also we can look on LinkedIn. You worked for HPE.
Sure.
Large company, not as large as it was, but still large in culture, and kind of the quintessential. I mean, the one of the progenitors of this generation of Silicon Valley.
Oh, sure.
And part of the way you sell at HPE, and part of the way you deliver solutions is where HPE, we're very big, we're very trustworthy, we understand, we'll be around. You're now at a startup. The interesting thing is the code, came from came out of actual use case, but like you now have to tell somebody, please trust. One, you have to work inside a startup, and you have 10 hats, and you run around. I know, I've done it. But two, you also have to tell people, trust us. This is cool enough that trust your infrastructure to us. So I don't know. What are your? I mean, after you've been a couple years at the startup. Are you? Sure. You still have hair? You haven't pulled it out? I mean,
a little gray, covered up by my headphones. But it is a little different, right? You are an HP, a Dell, a VMware, right? You walk in, people know you, they trust you. You have an ELA. There's a long history there. It is a little bit different in startup land in terms of explaining where you come from, where you are. But one of the things I've seen, I think, over the last 3 or 4 or 5 years really is a shift of attitude in the I&O function at big enterprise companies, whereby they are a lot more open to new technology. I mean, as IT professionals, we all like getting, nerding out on new tech, but 10, 15 years ago, where it was, hey, nobody got fired for buying IBM or whatever your classic tagline was, today, you walk into a big enterprise environment, they literally have hundreds of tools from different vendors of differing sizes, open sources, all over the place. And actually, it's kind of one of the reasons we exist is no longer can you buy from a single vendor that you've always trusted, that's always been there. A modern data center floor at a big enterprise is a train wreck. And I mean that lovingly because they're our customers, but it is so hard to get anything done. You have to be open to new technology to help.
Right. Especially as all these clouds, public clouds are built with lots of open source from lots of different projects.
For sure.
Well, let's dive into a little bit. I know we have Chris Bungie here as well. Maybe Chris, if you could turn on as we kind of transition into our slides here. I don't know. So Brad, you guys just came out with version 4.
Yep.
It looks interesting. Any particular, take us behind the curtain a little bit? I mean, any particular surprises? Any particular things that were easier or harder or?
Yeah, I got a handful of slides I can kind of run through to ground people. But for people who saw the press release in 4.0, it was always interesting when I was at big company, when you did a press release or a new announcement, you didn't call out your competition because you're just giving them airtime. In our case, what am I going to lose? Everyone knows kind of the big guys. So I really wanted to point out for folks that, particularly in this multi-cloud world, and if I widen the optic of cloud to include multi-platform, right?
Mm-hmm.
Big enterprises that have, a set of bare metal applications, certainly a ton of VMware out there. They're looking at doing things with Kubernetes. They might have some AWS. They might have some Azure. Putting your bet from an automation orchestration into a single part of that stack can be limiting. So our ultimate goal is to love everybody, to be agnostic. We want to help enterprises have degrees of freedom to take the best of those different platform technologies, no matter what premises they're on, and bring that all together.
Was well, I mean, again, I look, we can sit here and make fun of the Gartner quadrants all we want, and they're easy to make fun of, but usually there's a couple, the way these work that I see they work out is there's a couple of like often the criteria it's very precisely created. Sometimes you feel like to get the bigger players, make sure the bigger players stay in. But what was unusual about cloud management platforms, I thought, was that the 4 people in the leader quadrant, and again, take it for what you will, right?
Sure.
It is a ranking. You shouldn't buy based on it or what. Let's disclaim all that. The 4 players were not super huge companies.
Yeah, we're all relatively small, by comparison. I think one of the criteria actually to get into it, there were about 200 technical criteria. For those who've gone through it, it's a pretty robust gauntlet. But one of the fundamentals was it can't take, I think it was more than 4 different products to meet that 200 criteria. And often what you find at big companies is, you tend to get silos of R&D, you get splinters of P&L. It can be harder for big companies sometimes to bring the pieces together, despite maybe the external view that, hey, you have all the ingredients, this should be easy. And you've been on the inside, right? That happens over time at a big company. So in our case, we pulled it all together. It is one platform.
Well, man, we've been talking about it, but let's what does Morpheus Data do? Let's
let me do let's see, we got about 20 minutes. Is that about right?
Yeah.
Ish. So I thought I'll fly through a handful of slides, and then Chris, why don't you introduce yourself real quick? Because Chris is going to do a little demo because I'd rather show than tell. So.
Yeah, sure. Chris Bungie. I've come from the large enterprise background for like infrastructure management and then VMware management, and then made the leap into Morpheus. And really what led me there was the customer background. I worked for one of the largest mortgage companies in the U.S. We were looking at trying to optimize our time to value, and Morpheus was the product that we brought in and just really turned around what we did internally, brought that public cloud feel on-prem.
Yeah, nothing like stacking the deck by bringing an actual customer to do a knife fight here. So, so yeah, I thought Chris would be the right guy to maybe run through a demo and just point out a couple of things just to get the taste buds going for VMworld. So let me just run through a little bit about kind of what we do. Feel free to jump in, John, ask some questions, interrupt. But I think one of the fun things about coming to a startup from a big company is brand has a whole new reality. So we've had some fun with the brand over the last couple of years. DevOps folks love their stickers and their nerd gear, so come by the booth and we'll get you all suited up. We do have some fun with the brand, but kind of taking a step at the market as a whole. Every good cloud deck has something about a journey. This is mine. I think the piece I wanted to highlight as you're kind of dipping in and as you look around at us and at others in this space, there are a few key kind of areas that we see emerging. And it kind of depends on your bias. Are you kind of coming from INO, or you have more of a developer background? And you can really look at some of the tools in the space and see where they fall. A lot of big companies who are just trying to get visibility into what they have. You probably would, or maybe you wouldn't be amazed at sometimes how opaque or how cloudy it can be to get visibility into how many VMs you have at a large enterprise. We've seen senior VPs who are orders of magnitude off in their estimation of just what they have under management. Second key area where we really see an opportunity to help customers is just around automating the provisioning. The background that Chris came from, he was the bottleneck. For anyone who's read the Phoenix Project, right? He was Brent. Everything ran through him. He was hundreds of tickets behind, despite his best efforts to provision new application stacks on behalf of developers and business units. And then on the far right, you're seeing more and more DevOps teams or dev teams just bypassing IT or asking to embed application provisioning as part of their pipeline, right? Infrastructure as code, a lot of stuff around OpenShift, some of the things you saw in that 4.0 release. So the underpinning tools, right? Optimization tools, kind of VM-centric automation, CMP are one kind of part of that equation. But a lot of the container cloud native technologies are the other. And we're taking part in projects at really big enterprises where senior leadership is tired of the siloed approach to automation. So they kind of want to bring that together. We're not trying to be the one ring to rule them all, but we do want to minimize tool sprawl and try and bring the pieces together.
Because I was gonna say, Brad, everybody still has both. I mean, as much as when you live as much as the public cloud world is growing, hugely growing. A couple of years ago, people were yelling, "Oh, all this other stuff is going to go away," and yeah, sure, and we're all eventually going to die. But it's still 2019, and there's still a lot of stuff on-prem, and there's still a lot of legacy apps that cannot move.
That is absolutely what we see. I mean, the world was simple, 20 years ago when I was an IT guy. Happy I moved to product management and marketing because it has gotten infinitely more complex, right? I stole this slide from one of our big customers, had it large scale printout in a war room. This is the operational complexity that their service delivery team had to navigate when a developer asked for a thing, right? They don't really care about a VM. They want an application service or an application stack. This is why it takes 2 or 3 weeks for the most part to get anything done when that developer says, hey, I need a new web server, or I need these tiered apps deployed for QA or into prod. It's also what's driving a lot of those development teams just to tell IT to go away. I'm just going to go to swipe my credit card and go to the public cloud. So this is the reality that we see in most, if not all, of the enterprises. Right? They may not have all of these logos, but they have all of these buckets.
Even if you just take a slice through this, right? That's still complex, right? Even if I just pick one out of every bucket. That's still not
it's not easy. I talked to a lot of CIOs, IT professionals, and they all have a dozen software defined things that are glued together by human middleware and ticketing systems and mountains of scripts that they've tried to glue it together, and that's really the last mile of streamlining it.
Right. And there are lots of ways to automate stuff. So let's.
So you mentioned kind of where we got our start. It is kind of a cool story. So it's a practitioner-based genesis. As a nerd, I like a good superhero story. We actually got our start inside a private equity fund. So my boss, our CEO, was a VC for a long time. Started a private equity company, But his goal in private equity was to use technology to go transform companies that he was buying. This was 9-10 years ago. He tasked, these 20 developers to go into companies and transform their IT, deploy new applications very quickly, and then run them with a very lean operating team. And they just didn't find what they needed. So they actually built a lot of the intellectual property over the course of 4 or 5 years to fulfill this mission in a very heterogeneous brownfield environments. A little over 3 years ago, we spun that out. And so this is a product and a tool set designed by IT and development teams for their own use. So it tends to fit the problem set in a unique way compared to some of the other people out here. Kind of 4 key areas that you'll see if you come by the booth and that we usually talk about. The core of the product is around self-service, giving a requester of an application service the tools to go get what he or she wants right away very easily. So service catalog, provisioning of workloads. However, when we're in this multi-cloud, multi-platform conversation, kind of 4 key things tend to come up. First, it's analytics. So you point us at your vSphere, point us at your OpenStack, your AWS, your Azure. We will scrape it, figure out what's there, give you recommendations, similar to like Terminomics might, help you get your house in order. But the reason it's usually a problem is there's poor role-based access. So we tie into governance, identity management, very fine-grained role-based access to do policies. So think of it as a single policy layer across your entire ecosystem. So not just Ansible or just VMware or just AWS. It's a singular approach to governance across that lifecycle. Third, we do give development teams the ability to do infrastructure as code, self-service access to bare metal, VM, containers. And then lastly, sometimes get overlooked is the less sexy day 2 operations. So giving those same teams the ability to scale their apps, to tie into monitoring, logging, backup, just operational tasks.
Super sexy if somebody had to do it. So like with the provisioning, I mean, do you have to do you use if I have a thing with Terraform or whatever, do I switch over to Morpheus, or can I use some of the things that I've set up there?
Yeah, you can absolutely set it up within us. One of the things I've described us almost as self-leveling cement, right? Most big enterprises have a number of tools that aren't talking to each other. They've got brownfields. We fill in the gaps to try and get to that frictionless surface. So we make it possible.
A lot of the integrations are ready.
Yeah, so that's one of the big differences, right? Time to value. We install in about an hour. We've had POCs in 4 hours that have done more than teams of professional services from other vendors have done in 6 months. That's a big part of the value.
This would be useful even in my own data center. What's the sweet spot here for your customers? Are they in a couple of, or do they have apps in a couple of different places, or when do they come and say, oh, I should try Morpheus?
Oh, Chris, I brought you. Why don't you tell us? What was your story?
Well, I mean, the bottleneck of just a single VMware infrastructure in our environment, like me doing the provisioning, me being the slow piece, getting tickets from 4 different directions, emails, walk-ups, phone calls, carrier pigeon, whatever you have. It was just too much being funneled through myself, and I was just one additional middleman. So that spawned off into where developers started just swiping P cards, going to public cloud, just getting that sprawl, that spend, and that loss of what is happening. So we fit great with single cloud, but then we fill that void when customers are starting to look at other options as well. I mean, that's right, cloud management platform. We treat them all equal. We're the glue in between it, and we can start to aggregate the data. Like if you have tags that you're tracking assets with, we can do costing and analytics off of those. We can enforce policies, and we bring a standard approach to your users. So they no longer have to be gurus in Azure and AWS and GCP and VMware and OpenStack. They just need to know how to ask for their items in Morpheus, and we'll do that for you.
So there's
most of our accounts are probably 80%
service and workflow going. Oh, sorry.
Sorry?
Oh, we were talking over each other. Sorry.
was going to say that sweet spot about 80-20, probably 80% still on-prem. They need to cloudify their on-prem, complexity, while at the same time simplifying that public cloud as they start to not just dip their toe in the water, but as they start to do more cloud native and public cloud centric apps. They don't want to have to relearn everything each time a new public cloud.
That's actually, you're kind of meeting the market where it is. That's kind of interesting, right? You didn't just do this is just for public clouds. Does this tie into help desk and that sort of self-service systems?
We do tie into ITSM, so like ServiceNow. So if you want,
that's where I was going. Yeah.
Yeah, ServiceNow, Sharewell, Remedy. But if you want to actually expose our service catalog inside ServiceNow, we can do approvals, workflows. So again, it's
this is very mature.
Unifying the tools that people already have that don't actually talk to each other without some sort of platform.
This would take, what did you say, 9 years of
about 9 years of work. Yeah, there's a lot of IP.
Yeah, that you can see that. Okay. This is interesting. Okay, cool.
And speaking of seeing it, I'll cede the floor to Mr. Bungie, but a quick plug in case we run out of time. So we are at VMworld. We got a little bit bigger booth this year. Not big by cohesive rubric standards, but big for us. It is right next to the basketball court. That's probably easier to find than 1957. But we have some good swag. We are trying to build our community. It's one of the things I started talking with John about while back. Now we're actually ready to get it off and running. So hit me up if you want a trial. We're starting to build that out, especially if you've got a blog or want to write on it. I'd love to connect. And
there's a Tech Field Day videos out there. You guys were doing that?
Yeah, we're doing Tech Field Day with Bosket and team. We got another one coming up.
That's if you're not at the show, that's a great way to get connected.
And we are going to be in September. They've got a Cloud Field Day coming up in September. We're going to be there. So yeah, so that's that. Here's my other fun.
That's ridiculous.
But so let's do it. Let me quit sharing and I'll turn it over to you, Chris.
I'll just steal it from you. Haha. All right. I think Chris, I have my picture.
Yeah, if we could move, we're kind of behind, but I don't want to, no pressure, but.
Yeah, I mean, I hit the highlights. I mean, we have a ton that we can do. So obviously you could get lost in the weeds here. I mean, really the highlights, we're treating any of the infrastructure, whether it's on-prem or off-prem, as agnostic, and we bring it in a simple fashion. There's platforms out there that say, hey, we do this, we do that, as long as you can code it. We're a UI-based platform, but we have a full command line and a full REST API if you want to get programmatic with it. Okay. We have countless clouds, more than I had ever heard of before I even looked at Morpheus. I didn't know some of these existed. So for example, like if I'm just bringing in VMware, it's asking for credentials. Clearly not my Chrome auto plugged in credentials here. But then we're just,
Chris, I'm not seeing it.
Is it not? Well, let me stop share and retry again.
I see your screen fine.
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. Perfect. All right, so I just went into the like our create clouds. We have several integrations in here of several different cloud types and endpoints. I saw that OpenStack is a crowd favorite.
We were joking. It's not a hypervisor, but yeah,
so like with VMware, I mean, we're just asking for your credentials, asking for the endpoint, and then you can scope them how you want. So you have several different ways of carving up the infrastructure to dole it out to your end users. We could tie this down to specific clusters, like we have in our demo environment here, or we could even ingest all of our clusters and then still carve it up elsewhere with our tenancy systems. So we can be a full MSP approach to tenancy, or we can do drill down and just be control different business units coming into a single tenant in an easy fashion.
One of the interesting things, and I saw in version 4, y'all are doing a kind of Ansible management, and that instead of Red Hat, I love folks at Red Hat, but sometimes to get into the whole OpenShift and Red Hat world, you got to get the whole stack, right? And I thought it was really interesting, like you manage Ansible scripts and can manage permissions and manage what when they get run and all that sort of stuff in a way like Ansible Tower, but which is A, pretty cool, and B, means you guys have to be usable and featureful if you're going to replace stuff like that. I don't know. I just think it's a good challenge, and it looks like one, like I say, one that takes years to do, which is kind of cool.
Yep. So we tie into the configuration management side, and there's been plenty of use cases where we've had customers realize they no longer need that tower. They can just go with Ansible, use it through Morpheus's portal, and grant that access to their users, still have the workflows, still be able to execute scheduled jobs, and be able to control the RBAC around it. So out of the box with the configuration management tool, we have these 5 here. I mean, Ansible and Ansible Tower have seen a huge surge over the last year for us, but we still tie in and play nicely with the others. Or even if you don't have those tool sets, we can script directly into Morpheus as well and do some of that code management for you.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think again, it seems like the world needs both, right? You need GUIs and you need scripts.
Well, I think the world's messy, right? And so we're trying to give you a platform to pull those tools together. If you want to do it via GUI, that's great. We also have a full API CLI. CLI's got, I think, 500 plus commands in it. So anything you can do in the GUI, you can do programmatically. So we're trying
Brad, what's out of scope for Morpheus? And I don't know, Chris, click around while we're talking.
Oh, sure.
I'd try and break. Well, actually, I'll pick one. Migrations. There's actually a button there called migrations. I steer away from because we do some occasional. We can convert system images. We can do onesie, twosie migrations. Everyone sees that, and they think we break the laws of physics and can transport, terabytes of data from one cloud to another. When we say multi-cloud, people aren't, moving left and right to save pennies, right? They've got a stack. There's some affinity to a given platform or a cloud. So migration's probably one of the things that's out. In so much as we'd partner with someone like Azerta who's got a data mover, it's built to do that. But if it has to do with an application workload, provisioning it, running it, automating the work around it, that's in scope.
Nice. Yeah. I mean, do you do much on the day 2 stuff in terms of monitoring? Obviously, they're full operation systems and SRE systems to look at. How much monitoring do y'all do?
Yeah, we're not trying to replace a tool you already have. We just want to bring them together. So our monitoring is application service oriented for the workloads we provision. But at provision time, we can set up your App Dynamics agent, forward your Splunk logs, set up a backup job. So we're not trying to replace monitoring, logging, or backup. We want to bring them into the lifecycle. Nice.
Anything else you want to demo here, Chris, or you guys want to leave us with?
I mean, it's just really it's the self-service and that whole life cycle around it, and then being able to bring in those different pieces. Whether it's do you have your third-party IPAM tool, or we have a light version of an IPAM tool for you that we can track IP utilization. Same with monitoring or logging, so we can fill the gaps on where tool sets might not exist, or we can tie into what you have in the platform. We just mentioned like backups. Like right now, I could trigger VM backups against the system and schedule those. So we will be that glue in between it and make sure that what you have in your environment is in a secured fashion and stays within the bounds of whatever your administrators choose through our policy system.
Right. Huh. Awesome. Any other final questions from folks? I think otherwise we'll move on. This is, again, we just want to kind of give a taste here, which this is super cool. And then to follow up with them. Where do you see the CMP world going, Brad? I mean, this is you can't have 10 versions of glue, and then like you say, everybody has their own stack. So it's clear that the world is not single stack. So that's I can go pretty far with VMware. I can go pretty far with AWS. I can go pretty far with Red Hat. But and the world is messy. I love that. I love that. I don't know where does this world go, Brad? What should people be looking at?
Yeah, I think where it's going is a lot where storage has gone over the last 10 years in terms of unification, right? There was file, there was block, there was object. I think more and more of those worlds are coming together. I think in the world of management and abstraction, a developer or a business unit does not want to care if it's bare metal, VM, container, serverless functions, in the not too distant future. They just want their application to run. So I think where this is going is unification without loss of some of the fidelity and the benefits you get from an individual platform. It's riding a fine line, but there are too many options for humans to manage all of those isolated stacks. It has to come together at some point.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Everything gets more automatic. Everybody does more of everything. Hey, one quick question: How do you play with vRealize automation?
That's a
Funny you should
toughie.
that.
You will get asked that question in San Francisco in 2 weeks.
Yeah. We love VMware. I'd say the VRA guys don't love us. We replace VRA, to put it bluntly. So VRA VRO is not really where we collaborate, but we love NSX, we love vSphere, we love ESXi. So yeah, we usually talk to customers who are trying to deploy VRA and maybe have been doing it for 3 or 6 months and just want something easier and a little more agnostic.
Yeah, easier or a little more agnostic. That makes sense.
And to add on that, I mean, we can play with like VRO workflows and still consume those. I mean, VRO has a REST API, and then we've been looking at ways to integrate with that and simplify that for our users.
You'll get there. Like I said, everybody needs to do everything. Hey, Amy wanted to remind folks that if you are interested in following up with the Morpheus folks, there is that opt-in link in the chat. Go ahead and do that, and we'll send your name over. They've promised us they won't put you on any. They won't have their very nice salespeople.
Yeah. Our marketing guy is useless, and we don't spam very well. So,
they hired you you're an engineer, and you're doing
bad move.
Development. There you go. Hey, thanks everybody. We'll move on.
Thanks for having us.
For coming in.
Yep, thank you.
Thanks, Chris. And Chris is not on Twitter, but he says he does have a blog, and just lost the URL at
codethethings.com.
Codethethings.com.
Yeah, we're turning him into a social influencer, so we'll get him into your training program.
Oh, Chris, have you been to VMworld before?
I have actually not been to VMworld.
Oh, dude, just come over. The people on this, come over, introduce yourself. There's about 30 or 40 people on this live here that will say hi, and you'll start.
Yeah, please swing by.
Fantastic.
We'd love to meet you guys.
Awesome. All right, cheers. Let's move on. So we've got a couple of other community guests, and then we'll let everybody go. I promised 90 minutes, which was a false promise. We got a couple of community folks. Are they here? Who is here? Who is next? Either Max and Arjan, and then we got John, and we could even have everybody come on together. But let's give everybody their spotlight. Arjan is here. Arjan may or may not be here. I don't have camera on. There's Arjan beaming in from the other continent, across the Atlantic. Arjan Timmerman, Max Mortellaro. Hey, thanks guys for coming.
Hello.
Hey. So just we always want to have the community on here, and so just wanted to touch base with you guys. We the conceit here is that this is around VMworld. Are you guys coming to San Francisco?
Nope.
Okay, well then this is a preview for some other conference. Anyway, tell us what are you guys been up to? The podcast is going, and the way I build it on social was just I was going to ask you all. You both work and you both do content, and then you do a little analysis stuff. You got the podcast going on, which means you get to talk to interesting people. So I'll just throw it out there, and people can go to your site techunplugged.io. See what's going on in the podcast, etc. In the last year, last 6 months, what's been interesting both on the research side and on the guests you've talked to? What's on your radar?
So there's a couple of things that we've been doing the last couple of months. We did a couple of white papers, actually in the last couple of about a year. Let's put it there. We've been to some interesting events also. We've been to CyberArk in the Netherlands. We were invited there to share some thoughts on what they were doing. We did a couple of white papers on solid state memory, as well as computational storage. So yeah, there were a couple of really nice things, and talking to some awesome companies like NGD Systems for the computational stuff.
Computational storage?
Yeah.
Yeah. That caught my. I like the name. I don't think I understand it completely yet. I mean, is it? And I don't know, Max. You wrote about? I think you were the lead author on that. I mean, is that kind of like things like Cohesity's building into its data platform, or what are we talking about here? It's more like or custom silicon even.
Yeah, it's really custom silicon. It's really different. So if you've been at the Flash Memory Summit, or if you've heard
going on right now, yeah, I wish maybe next
right
time.
now, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of hype going on around that. So what they're doing is that they're putting basically computing or computational capabilities with the storage. So they're putting basically a CPU and RAM on an SSD, and they're doing all of the computation locally. They have a system on a chip, and they have a containerized environment, so you can run containers directly on the storage and do in-situ processing of the data.
Jeez.
So you have a system, an x86 server, you get the cheapest CPU in there, you get 24 SSDs, each SSD has computational capacities, you run your container straight on the storage, and you save a lot of money if you're in a hyperscaler. So
are the CPUs on the storage, are they x86 or are they custom?
I think they're ARM chips, actually.
ARM chips. Okay, well that's the next best thing. Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, Max, what's on your radar other than computational storage?
Oh yeah, well, about computational. Besides that, I mean, you've seen that, right? I mean, we've been quite active with the podcast, so I mean, we're not really focused only on storage, but let's say that storage is one of the interesting things somehow. So
well, I'm not really focused on infrastructure, but I end up doing a lot of it. Yeah.
So we've interviewed recently with our very good friend Howard Marks, who's been moving to the dark side. Heard they have cookies there, so there is that going on. We have a couple white papers which are in the process of getting published. It's not official yet, but they're in validation. So Ariane wrote a very nice piece. I've got something out myself, and we have something on the more longer term going on. And we're really trying to kind of, let's say, as independent influencers or analysts, if you will, we are part of this community, right? We all grew with the VMware community in the beginning of this decade, and we've been each going towards our own journey. So this is the journey we've been going towards, which is kind of trying to look at the technology and explain it to our friends, which are more still we are lucky to be still on the technical side of things, if I say it that way. And that's pretty much it. So we really try to explain, to talk, create video content, and that's what we're up to with Ariane. So a lot of traveling, a lot of events, let's say participations to make sure we understand what's hot, what's going on, make sure that we can communicate to our audience in one way, that we can talk with the vendors and give them some feedback, and that's pretty much it, right? So yeah. Ariane, if there's anything I've missed so far.
Yeah, don't forget that we both still have a full-time job on the side as well.
Hey, I was just reading something, and I need to find the reference of some study that showed that people who have a day job and a side gig, whether that is a little different, actually are the happiest because you can do your day job and then you have something to be a little bit more creative or expressive or interesting. It's when you make this, it's when you make the side gig the full-time job. I mean, and often it's an art thing or if it's a hobby or whatever. But in this case, the side gig is a little different than the day job in that it's not running production stuff. I don't know, you guys, if many folks listening to this or here, think they would love to kind of get, if you want to go work with vendors, often it starts as a freelance. I don't know, any particular advice or any things you've learned over the last year about what a vendor wants from a technologist who can write and understand and explain?
For me, it starts with understanding the technology you're really interested in and make sure that you tell your customers what they really need. Listen to your customer, make sure that you know more than just one thing, and steer them in the right direction. Already mentioned a couple of times here is the Tech Field Days. I think that's an awesome source of information as well.
But I mean, if a vendor, why are they coming to Max and Ariane to write something up? I mean, they have usually a dude, who can write a white paper, and they can the engineers because they're next door. So what all, when you talk to them, why are they, what are they bringing? I mean, you're building this Tech Unplugged brand and channel,
Yeah.
which
That mainly has to do, if you ask me, mainly has to do with an independent voice. Vendors also notice that if they got a engineer from themselves, they will gladly tell the story. But for engineers that are not of a vendor, they will not. They will listen less to those people because it's like telling your own story to someone and trying to sell your own story. And when someone else is doing that, who's been in the industry for many years, people tend to listen more carefully and more closely. So I think that's why a lot of the vendors are looking for the voice of us, but also other people as well, right? They need the story to be told by people who are still in the field and still can tell what's going on there, and tell the story of the vendor. So that's why we have these voices.
Yeah, and there's also the fact that they can hire as many experts as they want. The company can hire as the most talented writers, but they're still paid by the company, right? So it's like if you're going to a restaurant and you have someone at the door working for the restaurant and tells you, come in, it's excellent in here. You'll be a bit worried, But if there's a good friend of yours, which is a gourmet, and tells you, you have to go eat there, it's going to be awesome. Well, I bet you're going to trust your friend more than the guy at the door. So there's something to that as well.
Yeah. And of course, it's interesting. There's always a collaboration. I mean, there's stuff that there's not all products are perfect. So there's always some interesting evaluation. Like, how can I help you explain this to people? And there's a trust level, but I can't say that this product is complete shit, right? So
I have to say, to get back to your point of what you were saying before about having the main job and having the side gig in a way, I think it's really helpful to still be in touch with the world of enterprise IT, to understand the struggles, the challenges, because when you get to talk with those vendors, when you go to those analyst events, when you have access to those executives, you can tell them, what the customer is really struggling with. They can sell you whatever magic pixie dust in a way, if I say it that way, but sometimes the customer needs are very simple. They're pretty much the same, right? So it can be a matter of integration. It can be some more process related. So it really helps us. I mean, it helps me to be able to go to those guys and tell them, I'm working with one company here, and here's what we're struggling with. So sometimes not all of the organization have reached a certain level of maturity. Some are a bit backwards. And sometimes it really helps put things in perspective when you talk with the vendors, which are trying to sell the greatest and latest. And sometimes the organizations are like a few months or years behind,
Yeah. And I shouldn't make too big of a deal. I've never run into the problem of I haven't liked a product. Sometimes you try to emphasize certain points. Anyway, hey guys, thanks a lot. I love the podcast, how it's developing. Keep doing it, and like the written stuff too. So, keep on keeping on. Let's keep on. I think I'm working on some podcast discovery stuff. I think for people that listen to podcasts, there's a set that are worth, that are definitely worth checking in on. So,
thank you so much, John.
Hey, thanks. So we won't see you in San Francisco, but we'll see you soon. Hopefully.
Absolutely.
San Francisco, but not at this event.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
All right. Well, let's thank you for hanging with us. Our last person who's actually been hanging on the line very patiently this whole time is John Nicholson. Right there, John Nicholson. So John, you had some interesting commentary on the back channel, but hey, thanks for coming, and really appreciate we'll close off with you. So John, thanks for being here.
Happy to be here.
So John, well, let's get the highlight. You guys are doing so Virtually Speaking podcast, and I need to speak to you about your marketing, but and what the actual podcast is called. But you're doing a live session at VMworld with you, Ken, and V Pedro Arrow, Mr. V Pedro Arrow. And anyway, tell us a little bit about that.
So we'll actually have some guests on. The guest for this will be Frank Denneman.
Nice.
Most people know him for various books on DRS and writing some absurdly detailed things about vNuma, and then William Lamb, who's
Also nice.
fairly well-known, notorious, great.
Dude, I'd pay to watch that conversation between the five of you guys.
Yeah, no, I've always said William Lamb is a precious resource we need to conserve for future generations. Just the amount of like scripts and one-off like hacks and like, hey, here's how to get, vSphere running on a, Apple Mini or something. He's just a great resource for really interesting things. So should be a lot of fun. We're going to talk some tech. We'll also talk some career, talk about some of the things that are changing, particularly around containers, and how to remain relevant through some of the changes going on.
That's good. One of the things, again, professionally, part of this conversation is around tech, and part of it is around craft of this side gig that a lot of us do. I love podcasting. I haven't been doing a lot of it myself, but one of the things is you guys have remained, even though you work for VMware and you talk about mostly VMware topics, you have remained kind of fiercely independent from, and you work in tech marketing, board marketing. Yeah. You guys have remained kind of fiercely independent from the marketing org, and I don't even know some of the.
Yeah, you are correct. We do not follow the proper branding colors and fonts, and we're not. It's an independent thing.
I can tell that marketing is not bringing you. Okay, here's your guest for this week. It's this person who's going to talk about this product. Right, it's a lot deeper than that. Has there been? And I think, we've talked. I don't actually know any of the.
No, there is some. Occasionally someone behind the scenes will be like, "Hey, what are y'all doing?" Or "Hey, we want to do," and we're like, "Yeah, that's not how this works." But and also at VMworld, by the way, beyond the live podcast, we're looking hopefully to have Pat and Michael on, which we normally do.
Very nice.
So very nice. Part of it, though, is the strength of the podcast in any type of technical marketing. Anyone who wants to work in the space is, if you're working on technical content that people want to enjoy, it can't just be copy paste of the superlatives of, the brilliant MBAs and product marketing want to do. And I love those guys. But technical marketing is a distinct thing. You have to have an authentic voice. You have to, say things that are, you have to be focused not just on discussing business value, but how things work. Yes. And so really our podcast, what we try to make it about, there's kind of a process and a script. One is really good audio quality, some things that, sometimes are lacking out there.
You sound really good today, by the way.
These mics aren't that expensive. But the other thing also is bringing on interesting guests and having them talk and letting them talk. And, we've got a good dynamic. Pete does a great job as a showrunner, keeping things going. I try to ask the questions that our guests would want to hear. It's kind of a process, but it's not that complicated.
We didn't actually prep this, so I'm just making stuff up right now. Okay. So this is how not to podcast, or maybe it is. You just cut this part out. I don't know. Any interesting stories of any favorite guests? Anybody you want to bring back? Any surprises? Anything that didn't go? Any episodes that maybe didn't go good in a funny way?
So we've had a couple of episodes that are interesting, and one we actually tried to record an episode once, not using Zoom, using Skype for Business, which I always now refer to as Skype for kindergartners, and we pretty much had to scrap that one. I think if we do, you have to remain committed to quality content you're putting out there. The other thing is just a general cadence. That's something to where when we started this, we said we got to get an episode out every 2 weeks. I've seen a lot of people, try to start up podcasts, be like, yeah, I'm going to put out 5 episodes and that's it. It's like, okay, no one's going to subscribe to that.
It is, yeah. You got to be consistent.
And the other thing is, making it non-scripted. You talk about, this isn't scripted, but that's something that occasionally people will be like, we need to review the script. And we're like, there is no script. One thing we do that is different is we heavily edit it in post-production. So if someone doesn't like something, I generally say clap loudly, yell a large expletive, something that we'll see in the waveform, and we'll go cut that out and make everyone sound pretty. So there's some benefits to the post-production. So, we'll record probably 47 minutes for maybe a 29-minute episode.
Yeah, no, it's nice. It's respectful to your listeners. Now, there are podcasts I listen to that are 2 or 3 hours long, and it's just like listening to a couple guys at a coffee shop, and they're talking about Macs or whatever. But hey, so let's flip it back to tech. You're still at VMware. You're on the vSAN. You're on the storage team.
Yep.
What's exciting you? What are you looking forward to?
So,
Tell us.
I mean, first off, I just came off of leave, so I've been blissfully unaware for the past couple of weeks. But I'm excited about VMworld. We've got some new functionality we're going to be talking about. I am on the vSAN Tech Marketing team, but one of the things is I am also starting to learn some more about VMware Cloud Foundation, some of the other products. One thing is it's great to be the guy known for vSAN. You've probably associated with me for a long time since I was kind of around since the beginning, but part of the joy of a company, that has a lot of different products in a lot of different areas is being able to kind of go wander in and say, oh, I'm going to go sit with some engineers and learn about, how we're doing SD-WAN and how one-way clocking works for measuring links, and really digging in to kind of the nerdy engineering conversations and finding that stuff out. Because sometimes I'll end up in a customer conversation, I'm meeting with someone down in New Zealand or something, and we start talking. They're like, oh, I have all these problems with networking, and we'll talk about NSX for 45 minutes, and then I'll be like, oh yeah, let's talk storage for the last 5. So I encourage people, even though people may want to become specialists in something, there's a lot of benefit to having a generalist skill set, or at least knowing some things in the other disciplines and other areas of infrastructure. Just because if you pigeon yourself into that one thing, there's going to be times where you show up to lunch with someone and, oh, it's a networking team. They want to talk networking. It's life.
Right. And I think that's some sort of pull quote we just had there. And I think I don't know. My personal thing is I think people confuse real hands-on technologists sometimes confuse knowing exactly what every configuration and button and patch level does versus knowing deep enough to be able to talk about the concepts and what happens. And even if they move the button or change the name of a parameter in the latest release, you can still have an intelligent conversation with the networking team because some of the concepts. You have to know some of the jargon, but you would never let you loose in production, designing something, but you can still have an intelligent conversation because you're well read. I don't know. Does that make sense to you, John?
No, it does. And one of my VMworld sessions I'm doing is actually a top 10 tips for vSphere and vSAN networking. And I'm doing it in partnership with one of the escalation leads from our support team who focuses on networking. And in the research for this, I've been going through and writing some blog series and making sure that I can still have these conversations kind of across disciplines.
Yeah. Nice. Hey, man, I appreciate you sticking around, and thank you for sharing a little bit about virtually. So now here's the branding problem. Is it vSpeaking, VirtSpeaking, which is the Twitter handle, Virtually Speaking? So as the marketing consultant, you have a brand consistency problem.
It's Virtually Speaking, which unfortunately there is, I think, a political podcast by the same name in the podcast apps. VirtSpeaking is because I think there was
Twitter handles can only be so long.
Twitter handles can only be so long. I don't know. There may be some branding conversations we need to have with Pete at VMworld. So, and personal branding thing, making sure your blog and your other stuff is consistent, and you've got, stickers to put on the back of phones and things.
You're good on the swag. You guys are good on the swag part, but anyway, so you'll be hanging out. Hopefully, catch you running around and catch that session. Hey, so John, thanks so much.
Booth. So we'll actually be on the floor.
What's that? Pardon?
We actually will have a booth. We'll be on the floor.
Oh, awesome. Okay, vSAN or Virtually Speaking?
Virtually Speaking.
Oh, dude, awesome.
Yeah, generally in the HCI zone, we're kind of in the back corner. So
yeah, check it out. Hey, well, thanks everybody. So John, thanks a lot. Hey, we're gonna wrap it up now. Thanks everybody. We only went a half an hour long. Hey, thanks everybody for joining us. If you're watching this on the recording, thanks for folks that stuck around live. We want to do this more on the regular if folks are interested. Somehow it's really interesting to talk to vendors, and it's also interesting to talk about the craft of being a community participant, whether you're blogging or creating content or doing user groups or whatever. There's some sort of synergy here. I'd love to be able to teach people. After VMware, we're going to continue to talk about cloud and containers. We're starting this program called the Insight. I think it's going to all be wrapped up in a program called the Insiders. At least that's the current plan, although we haven't launched it yet. But to do more of this, to work with people in a very kind of informal way and have kind of, be able to have these kind of conversations, and also to bring other people in. That's the other goal is, bring in new folks and not just be the secret counsel. Hey man, I'll let everybody go. Thank you. We'll see you all in VMworld if you're coming. If not, stay tuned. There might be more coming from us. There will be more coming from us. Really appreciate all of our guests, John from Cohesity and Brad and Chris from Morpheus Data. Thank you, Udine Porter de Leon, for telling us about Level Up. Thank you, John Nicholson, for talking about us virtually speaking. And thank you, Ariana Max, who jumped in. And Amy, who is dialing in from Barcelona itself, after having had a dinner of an early dinner of probably ham and cheese. So Amy, thanks a lot. You want to say something so the camera switches over to you.
Yep. Thanks, you guys. It's good to see everybody, and the links are in the chat. They'll also be in any links we shared today will be in the email with the replay video.
And we'll call it a day. Oh, hey, I actually had a shirt on. I forgot even to. I've been. It's one of those days. I wore this one again. I resurrected this one from 2007, I think. But VMware rocks. Woohoo! Anyway, on that note, we'll call it a day. Cheers. Hang loose. Mahalo. Aloha.